joy to welcome everybody here today, and first of all to everybody who's in the room here at the National Liberal Club in London. Thank you, welcome. There's a great deal of expertise and commitment here, and also to the approximately 300 people who are watching this remotely. We wanted to say thank you for your time and commitment, and we are so excited because, as most of you know, there's been a big announcement. The Nice Quality Standard on FASD was released just 5 days ago. When we started the process, that I'm going to explain to you a little bit, we had no idea that it was going to come out this window, and especially after such a long wait. It's just been a whirlwind of a week for the FASD community, and it's amazing to be able to gather here together to celebrate that time. We're going to talk today about a new report. It's called The Time Is Now. And boy, is it, I think we could all even maybe say the time's way past when, but here it is, the time is now for change. We're going to make sure that our slides are working here. So first we wanted to just have a quick word of welcome from Kevin Price, who's the acting chair of the National FASD Trustees. Kevin.
Thanks, Sandy. Just very, very brief welcome from me on behalf of the National FASD Trustees. Just to echo what Sandy said, there's a real sense that this is a great time and real payback for all those people. I know many of you here today who've worked tirelessly to promote awareness of FASD, and so it's a really, really timely gathering, and it's thank you for coming, and it's going to be a really fascinating session. So that's all my job. I just want to say hello. I am the acting chair of the charity, and I look forward to meeting some of you after the presentation.
Thanks very much. So, unfortunately, you're stuck with me as the chair today, though the whole process of these roundtables has been co-chaired with Professor Raja Mukherjee, who's known to pretty much mostly everybody in the community. Sadly, after years of having avoided COVID, he caught it this week, so he's not able to be here. So you're stuck with me for a moment, and I'm just going to talk very briefly about why this is such an exciting time in the FASD world. We're calling it a tipping point. And there has been, in the last year or two, more action on FASD from the official bodies than there has been in the decades since the first FASD diagnosis was done in the 1970s. We're calling it a tipping point because now there's no going back from this moment. There's more information about all of this on the National FASD website. We're not going to be able to go into great depth about all of this, but in particular, the Nice Quality Standard on FASD that came out this week is a real game changer, and we encourage people to find out more about that. For those who are watching who are from clinical commissioning groups or are policymakers in other ways, we think that this now, along with the other work that's been done recently, tips us over into the time when there's no longer any excuse for action. So this has been a fast-paced project. It started in December. I think you can imagine that when we decided we were going to try to do something like this fast, we had a little bit of a, can we do it? Are we going to be able to do it? We all have busy lives anyway, type of reaction to it. But we decided we needed to. Again, I think times now we take that very seriously. And goodwill overcame very hectic schedules. We think that collectively we created something much bigger, literally, than any of us thought or anticipated at the time. I don't know if you're able to see, but this is quite a hefty document. It's just a pleasure to see it all in one place. So how the report came about, we held a series of 9 roundtables that were convened by the National FASD Experts Committee between December and March of this year. They focused on the national perspective on ramping up FASD prevention, diagnostic, and support services. As I mentioned, it was co-chaired by Professor Mukherjee and myself, and it was made possible thanks to the generous support of the Sylvia Adams Charitable Trust. There were 61 participants overall. They included paediatricians, psychiatrists, GPs, commissioners, public health experts, researchers, and leaders from the third sector and charities. Overall, 21% of the people involved have lived experience. Those are mostly family members of people with FASD. We had on average 25% in each session. And participants took part in their individual capacities. And it was done according to Chatham House rules, which means the substance could be reported out, but not attributed to any individual. We think that gave us some flexibility to explore things in more depth. So here it is, hot off the presses, the time is now. This is available on the National FASD website. There's a fully interactive version available there now. And we have lots of copies to distribute should anybody want some of those copies. So very quickly, the 10 key themes that we pulled out of it. Number 1, there's been unprecedented work done by all major public health bodies in recent years. This work is groundbreaking, but to be transformative, it's now the time for joined-up thinking and a clear political message to operationalize those recommendations. Number 2, FASD is preventable, and increased attention is needed to ensure the Chief Medical Officer's guidance on alcohol and pregnancy is understood across healthcare professions, in education, and in the general public. Number 3, for the first time, the UK has a solid active case ascertainment prevalence study conducted by the University of Salford. This is a wake-up call. We'll talk more about all of these points in the next in the preceding discussions. Number 4, the Sign 156 guideline for children and young people exposed prenatally to alcohol has been accepted by NICE. Training and awareness across government and public health bodies is required. Number 5, integrated care systems and NHS trusts now have the foundation they need to start to build a case for developing local pathways for prevention, diagnosis, and support. Number 6, people with lived experience need to be at the core of planning, and those with FASD expertise should be engaged at all levels. If I could underline that and put it in bold, highlight here, this is a key message that we want everybody across the country to take from today. Number 7, urgent action needs to be given as to how to set up FASD diagnosis pathways, possibly using a hub and spoke model, but there are other models as well, so that individual practitioners can access the multidisciplinary resources and can have appropriate peer support as required for FASD diagnosis. Number 8, care management plans are included in the NICE quality standard. These require special attention by policymakers. Number 9, policy progress is extremely welcome, but action is also needed for those areas not covered. And number 10, public policymakers must use joined-up thinking to meet the identified needs of this vulnerable population and give this issue profile. So that's just a very quick overview of the report. Now we're going to dive into some of the details, but first and most importantly, we want to start with why it's important and why it matters. And it's my great pleasure to introduce you all to one of the leaders in the FASD community, Nairi Cox, who is a member of the National FASD Adults and Young Adults with FASD Advisory Committee, who has done so much to encourage people to understand why diagnosis matters, including their adults. So Nairi, you're going to come up and just for a few minutes explain to us all what your journey's been like and help people understand why diagnosis is important.
Hi everyone, my name's Nairi. So like Sandra just said, I have battled for 8 years to be diagnosed because unless you knew me, you wouldn't know that I had FASD. So since the age of 40, I have known this condition was there. I'm a 1973 baby, so I literally give my age away. Both my parents were alcoholic. Brought up living in pubs from Irish backgrounds. I'm the youngest of 3 girls and I've always struggled through school, basically everything, and just put it down to me being, I suppose, the naughty one out of 3 and finding my way. So it was only when I literally watched a film and my husband turned around and said to me, "This is about you, you know, this is you, this is talking about FASD," and to know, I can't remember what the film was. And then I started researching it and oh my god, okay, well, I have the facial features because I'm a bit older now, my face has changed. But I have both parents consistently drinking alcohol. My mum, bless her, she's 81 now. She still can't function without having at least a whiskey every day. My dad's passed on now, but it was a brilliant that you knew it was, you know, hands in hands. I don't ever have anything against my mum, you know, she's my mum. But I can make a difference for other children and, you know, youngsters that were in that same sort of situation. So once I contacted my doctor, and I was the pain in all my GP's backside because I went through every single doctor to say, please can I have a genetic test? And they'd be saying, well, why? Well, because I have this. I am diagnosed with dyslexia when I was 20, and you know, I'm delayed in a lot of things, like basically black and white through life. And it took my 8th GP from my GP surgery to say, okay, you have things that match up, let's get this done. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have had this done now, so I hold it all to my doctor who actually listened to me. So yeah, and then when I finally got my genetics done, that was ticked, and then a few years later, when I eventually got the funding through the CCG, which took 5 attempts to actually get that done, then I ended up getting fast track with Raj, which I'm extremely grateful because Raj has just been amazing, and I know he's obviously watching this, so thank you very much. Then I got my first appointment with him in October, and then I actually got diagnosed in the January. So I was like, thank God for that. I felt like I'd won the lottery. You know, I wasn't a fraudster. I was actually genuinely like, you know, okay, I have no facial, but you don't need facial, and that's the big stigma. So many people would say, oh, but you need to have this. You don't. You've got to look at the bigger picture. You've got to look throughout to say, okay, well, there are alcohol exposure. Let's see how it's affected her life. You know, I am at an age now where I've struggled through school, I've struggled through life, and now at work. I'm a visual merchandiser, just like, well, see, we have that creative side. You know, I'm just shopping with Marks and Spencer's, big company, and I've gone through quite a few bosses, and it's only my boss I've got now, she's totally understood it. So all it takes is someone to listen, understand, and you know, take that bit of time to say, okay, we can support you. We are capable. So 2 years ago, I passed my driving test. Never ever thought in 30 years I would ever be able to drive, and it's not even automatic, it's a manual. So, you know, it's a massive achievement, you know, it takes a lot more concentration. Okay, I might not be able to have my radio on and anyone talks to me, I have to fully concentrate, but I am able to do things. It takes a lot for me to do things, but you know, I can do it. You just need that bit of support and, you know, just that family growing up behind you to be able to do things. And I'm just glad with the support of Sandra and the whole FASD team and Raj and everyone that has been there for me, believed in me and knowing I could do something. It's, you know, it's not about me now, it's about, you know, the younger generation and all our other youngsters that are in the care sector to say, okay, let's support this child, let's make sure they've got everything they need to feel that they're successful adult life, because in the end of the day, that's what we want. We want our children, doesn't matter if they've got a label, everyone's got labels, we've got nice clothes, doesn't matter. We just want to be able to, you know, succeed in life. So, thank you.
Irene makes that sound easy, but Irene has been fighting for 8 years to get a diagnosis. And that was a long 8 years while she was trying to better understand herself, trying to live her best life and to get the support that she's entitled to as somebody who has FASD. So, you know, all huge credit to Irene. She's also a mom to 3 and a wife, and, you know, I don't know how she does. I learned from her how to be a better parent, and she's been, as I said, part of the Adults and Young Adults with FASD Advisory Committee, and they've been giving input into so much of the work that we've been doing, and so, you know, hats off to Irene because she's my inspiration. Next we're going to hear from Raja, But as we said earlier, unfortunately, though he dodged COVID for the entire time, he is having to do this remotely. So I hope that the video works well, and our tech team, please let me know if there's any problem with this.
As for those of you who don't know me, my name is Raj Mukherjee. I'm a consultant psychiatrist and clinical lead for the National FASD Experts Committee clinic based in Surrey Borders. Unfortunately, I'm not with you, and I should be with you. But unfortunately, I tested positive for COVID last week, and rather than come and be a super spreader, I'm still testing positive, so I'm isolated still at home. And so unfortunately, I will be watching, and I'll be watching myself at this point, so I'm talking to yourself and listening to myself, which is a bit weird, but I'm there with you in spirit. So it's really unfortunate, because we've been really looking forward to this, because this day can't be underestimated. Because it's not just a culmination of nearly 4 months' worth of work, trying to pull together a group of experts from around the country to talk about a subject that is passionate to so many of us here. Something I've been doing for over 20 years, but something where it feels like there is a momentum that's growing. And this document that we're being produced today, that's being launched today, is just one of those documents that will help move all that forwards. In the last 20 years, I can certainly say in the first 15 years, it was very much us pushing against doors and feeling they were closed. And whilst the doors are not wide open, there's a little bit of a crack that we start to see where people are starting to show interest. The fact that there are so many people who take part in these, from a wide background of expertise and settings, are all indicators that the situation appears to be changing. And the drivers that are now in place are helping us move forward. I think it's important that we say that actually this is the start, not the end. And so alongside the nice quality standards, this document will help people guide what is good practice for around the country, but there are still areas and limitations. So for example, the nice quality standards deals only with children. It doesn't really deal with adults, and there's the need for the fact that we need to think also what happens to people later on. One of the things that we've learned and done over the last 20 years, an area which has been, where probably I've been different to other people who were around at the time I started in this field, is that I've been also interested in the academic side. And when I started 20 years ago, there was lots of questions. What do we know about FASD? How common is FASD? Is it something that actually exists? Are there pathways that we can care? And what we've done progressively over those periods of time is answer some of those questions from a UK basis. So we know what carers in the public think. We know professional opinions. We've done work around birth mothers' experiences of FASD. We started to pull apart what is the impact of prenatal life, what is the impact of postnatal life, because they're fundamental questions in child development that we need to understand, and those things are slowly starting to be answered. We've identified models of care and how to have pathways, and this document has things in there in some of the sections which will address those aspects. And we know that actually we need to answer the so what question, and we've started to do some of that as well. And to offer interventions to FASD so that it's not just there's no point in diagnosing, it's that there is a point in diagnosing because we know there's something you can do to make people's lives better. The problem is, so far, there's been very little funding that has gone towards it. So most of this has been either people's own account research, where they've done it for themselves, or as PhDs, or interns such as my PhD or other people's PhD. There's been very little research body funding that's gone towards this. Now that's slowly changing, in that there's been a few grants now gone towards FASD pieces of work, but we need to move that forward. We need to get more funding to actually answer more questions. Because once you've answered one question, you end up with another 3 or 4 questions which need to be funded. And unless the research council starts to take this more seriously, we're never going to switch into that position. One of the things that we've been able to identify is the prevalence of FASD in the UK. And so we've identified between 1.8 and 3.6% of children in Greater Manchester had this condition. This was a project conducted by my colleagues in Salford, led by Penny Cook, and we were funded by Greater Manchester, which allowed us to look at some of those children. Now, COVID got in the way of that as well. unfortunately, because we were starting to get into schools, but unfortunately with COVID happening 2 years ago, we had to stop. And so we didn't get to see as many children as we wanted. That explains some of the breadth and prevalence, but there was also some issues where not all the information was always there. The international expectation for the UK was around 3%. So this is very much ballpark what we would expect to see for that whole area. It's important recognition that the 3% is what we're dealing with. So one of the things that we've moved on to look at is how we answer that so what question. So, for example, here is a project that was funded by the MRC to allow us to develop a parenting intervention. And this was one of the first funded projects for FASD in the country by a major funding body for research. We need more of that. If we start to answer some of these questions, what we will see is that there will be a better overall outcome, and we can start to do that. Unless we invest and we actually start making these changes, we're going to be continually having questions and not the answers. And I'm going to stop talking there and hand over to the next person. I'm sorry I can't be with you today. I really do look forward to joining you, but I hope today goes really well.
Raja, if you're listening, they were just all applauding you, not just for the 5-minute presentation, but also for the good work over all these years. Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Patricia Jackson. And I first met Patricia when I was sitting lonely at a booth at the Royal College of GPs annual conference. And this very kind woman who I didn't know at all at the time sat down next to me, and we started a dialogue that's still continuing, I think. So it's a real pleasure to introduce Patricia. Patricia, please explain a little bit about your background too as you come up.
First of all, a big thank you for being able to speak at the meeting today. I'm from Northern Ireland, but I'm based in Scotland. Sure. And in 5 minutes, I'm going to try to describe a process that probably took us about 5 years in Scotland to actually get to where we were. The process that I'm going to concentrate on today is theme 4 in the Time Is Now, which is about the diagnosis and how we are able now to have an approach to diagnosis right across the UK. So, I'm going to talk about sign guidelines. And some of you may never have heard of sign guidelines, so I thought I'd put it a bit in perspective. It's, as it says on the slide, Scottish Intercollegiate Guidelines Network. And it's work that is sponsored by Health Improvement Scotland in this case, but obviously there's health improvement areas in England as well. But ours is called SIGN, and we look at how we can improve the lives of people with a particular condition. So the process is set up so that there's a review group, which is of many people who are experts in particular areas of FASD in this case. And we also, and I think this is really important to note as well, we also have parent representation, because the whole aim at the end of it is that whatever we do, it will be helpful to parents, their children and young people. We looked at all the evidence to do with FASD across the past 10 years to see whether we could decide what was the best way, as it were, at this moment in time to diagnose FASD. And we refined it down, Raj was talking about the difficulty, there are so many questions to answer, and that was a difficult at the beginning, but we refined this down to 3 questions that we thought we could answer. This was looking at recording accurate alcohol histories, looking at what was the best way currently to be able to diagnose fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and then importantly we were looking at post-diagnostic outcomes, so how can we best help people who had this condition. So what do we hope were the benefits of the SIGN guideline? And the most important thing at this moment in time to me was that unlike in other diseases that are considered by SIGN guidelines and NICE actually accepted all the evidence that we had looked at, and they thought that the process that we had followed was robust enough for them to say we don't need to do this over again, now we're going to move on and produce the standards. And as Sandy says, those have now been published just last week. But that meant that it certainly cut down on the amount of time, because lots of things didn't have to be revisited. So now we have across the UK a standardised approach for clinicians, which I hope will make it simpler for paediatricians like myself to be able to diagnose FASD, and also for those colleagues in CAM services as well. We've got terminology that we're using that matches on a worldwide basis, and particularly matches to the Canadian guidelines, the Australian guidelines, New Zealand, South Africa, so we're able to enter into an international community and compare results and outcomes from children. We made it really quite simple, and some people may have problems with this, but hopefully not. But we have FASD with sentinel facial features or without sentinel facial features, by far the majority of children, and then a third group of children who were at risk from neurodevelopmental delay, which was probably related to prenatal alcohol exposure. So we hope this will simplify it and clinicians will find it easier to diagnose. So consistency of information, evaluation of post-diagnostic benefits, and also, as Raja emphasised, the importance of collaborative research working. 3 areas to be explored, quite crystallised into 3 different types of areas to look at: alcohol exposure, facial features, and areas of assessment of the central nervous system, which were all going to contribute to the diagnosis. By far the most challenging thing, I think, from a practitioner point of view, is to be able to properly assess the different areas of function of the neurology of the child, to be able to know what the particular problems with the way their brain is wired is actually making it difficult for them. And a lot of work still needs to be done on that, as you'll see from my next slide, which looks at different areas that we need to look at. We hope we've simplified the outcomes now in the diagnostic process. So from 256 possible diagnostic codes, we've asked people to just think about 3. So FASD with sentinel features, without sentinel facial features, or those at risk. And of course, we need, when we're looking at assessing children with neurodevelopmental problems, always to say, well, it isn't always going to be FASD, and those children just as much deserve support. So why do I think the multidisciplinary assessment bit is going to be so critical? If you look at the next slide, you'll see that all of these areas of brain function need to be assessed so that the child with FASD, or the young person, or the adult in Narine's case, is actually offered a management plan that not just makes the diagnosis, but actually makes their lives simpler for them through the education process, through judicial service, through employment, through anything at all that they're experiencing. And you'll recognise from the different things that are described on that different folk with different expertise will be involved to try to help in the assessments. We've provided people with a diagnostic algorithm, so they're able to move through a process, so that a clinician looking at this would be able to say, which area am I looking at? Does this person have facial features or not? And I don't have time to go through it, but I would refer you all very much back to slide 156 or the themed report, because it's all discussed in much more detail there. So it's all very well having this nice process now that we think will work, but people have to be trained into it. So my final slide is actually about training, and this for me is the key to success. We've got to have people out there in the community, whatever area of work they're in. Now, I'm in the health area, so I feel I know more about how to train health practitioners with the widest variety, nurses, AHPs, all of the folk who could be involved with help with assessments. But equally well, social workers, educational psychologists, folk who are in different areas of work can all contribute to the assessment and the basic planning and management plans for these children. So I think we need training for everybody. So everybody needs to be FASD aware, everybody needs to understand, and Nara talked about that really so nicely, how once people understand FASD, then it makes sense to them why certain things are possible to do, certain things you have talents at, and certain things you maybe need a bit more support on. So I think everybody should be aware of this. But looking again at health staff, I think it's really important that this is put in early in the curriculum, that people know that this is a very common neurodevelopmental problem, that they know there's a way to diagnose it, and that they're trained as to how they will do that. And that will take people with expertise like Raja, Neil, Jez, people who I know who have been involved with organising different types of training in the college. Michelle is going to speak later. It will take all of us who know about FASD to help the next generation of folk who are coming through. I'm going to be quite complimentary about our college, the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, who have started to develop training for paediatricians. But it needs to be for every Royal College, for the nurses, for the AHPs, for psychiatrists, psychologists. Everybody needs to be looking at getting this into training. And my hope is that the time is now for training to really move forward in this area. And I would just leave you with that thought, and I hope that anyone from any of the Royal Colleges or from the training and curriculum services will take that message on board. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. And people who have read the Nice Quality Standard closely will understand that woven through the entire thing is references to the need for local areas commissioner services to demonstrate that they have made progress on training in particular, but also on all of these points. We're now really lucky to hear from someone who wears two hats as he comes into this room today. Richard Clements, please come up now, and he works with the clinical commissioning group, and for those who don't know, clinical commissioning groups are the kind of, you can describe it better than I can, but the power horses behind all of this, and they're the ones who commission services that are being called for. So with that, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit more, and take it over.
Clinical commissioning groups actually have a short lifespan now. They're going to be replaced, but I'll touch on that in a moment. So, yeah. Well, yes, good afternoon, Jess, I think. My name is Richard Clements, and I'm going to just share some thoughts from a care system point of view before we later hear from Rasheen Reynolds, I think, and Dr. Michelle Bond about some of what they've actually been doing in their own localities. When I first learned about FASD as a parent, 8 years ago, with my wife Rachel, we adopted two great kids, a brother and sister, when they were 8 and 7. But after about 2.5 years, we could tell there were some developmental differences appearing, and we knew their early life history, so we began to start looking for a better understanding of what might be happening. It was at a presentation about FASD that a light went on. We began to realise how some of the repair for early life trauma that they were attempting was perhaps made difficult by other neurological damage. Now, as a healthcare commissioner looking at service improvements, it was perhaps inevitable that I started using some of my approaches and work to try and understand FASD better and what support might be available. I did the obvious. I looked in the Public Health England website, the NHS Improvement website, and of course NICE. But this was 2016, and there wasn't a lot there. And it was striking to me how that really contrasted with some of the international papers and studies that were available in terms of population studies from USA, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. Fortunately, there was also Scotland, and their work in developing the sign, and the guidance which has in turn led to the NICE quality standard, which we're marking the launch today. The quality standard is really valuable to me as a parent, but it also means that people like me, working to plan and improve healthcare, can react differently now. It fires a start gun for care providers to look at care needs and how to support them. This slide is just my high-level representation of what I see as quality improvement. Basically, firstly, understanding the needs that are to be addressed. Then, developing appropriate care processes. This can cover diagnostics, assessments, care options, preventative care, care management. I think I've included there workforce development as well. And then from moving through to implementation, looking at what the results are, what are the outcomes you're getting, and then using that as feedback for further development and improvement of quality. In the 15 years I've been working in health, I do think that nationally we've improved in working in this way in quality management, partly through organisational changes and also better data management. There are some further changes about to take place. The creation of the integrated care boards to manage integrated care systems. So it's goodbye CCGs. But I do see this as very, potentially very helpful, particularly for the needs of people with FASD, because of its aim around integrating health and social care. In fact, if I was asked to work on a business case for FAD, I'd love the chance to build an outcomes and benefits case that covered the areas of social care, adoption, health, education, health and social care, rather than just a health-only model, which is often the focus today for CCGs. I do believe that right now the data is available for integrated care systems to start the work. Population data that's available is sufficient, and they've got their own local kind of knowledge and learning from the wealth of experience of schemes that they will have kind of introduced to date. My final hope is that the integrated care boards will pick up the quality standard and work with it quickly, because FASD is a whole-of-life condition. The sooner assessment and care planning is offered, the sooner those with FASD will benefit, and in turn, the sooner the whole system of care can benefit from their improved outcomes.
Thanks very much, Richard. Now we're going to hear from Roisin Reynolds, who, in addition to having a day job that you're going to hear about, that is quite directly related to the work, particularly the prevention side of things in Greater Manchester. She's also one of our trustees. And so, Roisin, over to you.
Hello everybody, thank you. So I'm going to talk about the prevention section 2, which is theme 2 in the report. So within Greater Manchester, we were very lucky that we did get some money to actually deliver an alcohol exposed pregnancy programme over initially a 2-year programme, but we're going now for about 3.5 years. So our programme actually consisted of prevention, support and knowledge, but I'm just going to touch on a bit about the prevention part of that today. So initially, as you can see from the diagram, we kind of looked at raising awareness of harm. So we have our Dry Mester campaign, hopefully you will see our website, and some of our social media coverage, which has been really positive and actually has won some awards and has been recognised both nationally and internationally. All of the work that we've done in relation to that campaign has been very much based on the Chief Medical Officer's advice. We've also trained a number of midwives to actually have appropriate conversations with women who are pregnant in relation to being sure that they're aware of the risks associated with alcohol use in pregnancy. Those lead midwives then went on to develop some awareness training for the rest of their colleagues across their trusts, and now that's actually been embedded as part of mandatory training in the 4 areas that we actually ran our pilot programme on. We also, along with National FASD, commissioned some e-learning, recognising that we can't deliver face-to-face training forever. Red Balloon Training did it all for us, so I do want to say how wonderful that was evaluated in relation to the work that Joe's done. But the e-learning has really started to pick up. We've had about 100 people now in Greater Manchester who have actually done the e-learning. For our pre-pregnancy interventions, we actually trained in total 390 professionals. And these were staff that are actually working out in the community. Staff working in wellbeing services, in drug and alcohol services, health visitors, and staff that came in contact with individuals who may not necessarily be planning a pregnancy, but weren't using an effective form of contraception, and were actively involved in a sexual relationship. They were trained in motivational interviewing regarding the risks of alcohol-exposed pregnancies and FASD. Within our maternity services, we introduced universal screening, utilising an alcohol tool, and the choice of that was sort of all at see and tweak. It was the trusts made their own decisions in relation to that. But what we have introduced is it is now documented on 3 separate occasions across the maternity and pregnancy in relation to the outcome of that tool, and it's actually documented in the mum's notes. And the final part around prevention was LARC. We trained a number of midwives to actually offer LARC to vulnerable groups for women who have already had an alcohol-exposed pregnancy, and prior to them leaving hospital, they're offered this as an option to try and ensure that they don't go on and have a second alcohol-exposed pregnancy. And what we're really, really pleased about is actually that continued right throughout COVID, when sexual health service actually had to close. So, some of the lessons learned that we've done, and you'll just bear with me because I'll have to read these. What's really important is that whilst we did have funding, it isn't just about money. Money allowed us to test new ways of working, but that wasn't what drove the greatest transformation. And actually, we're now working with other maternity services across Greater Manchester where we don't have a budget to offer them, but they're actually implementing alcohol-exposed pathways. We have a Greater Manchester lead midwives group, and we're currently writing an operational policy so that there's actually a Greater Manchester pathway rather than maternity services working differently. It is about hearts and minds. Don't underestimate the importance of engagement, and absolutely, as Sandra said earlier on, the voices of people with lived experience is absolutely paramount when you're doing this kind of work. Evidence matters, but only a little bit. We did commission the first prevalence study, and we're really proud of that. But actually, it's really important that that has limitations, and we can't just rely on evidence. We've got to be brave. Some of this is like jumping into the unknown, and we're aware of that. We did that quite a lot. And it requires a learning culture and a willingness to fail, learn, and adapt. It is complicated. It's not an easy thing to do. Driving change in any area is not easy. But hopefully now this fabulous report and the nice quality standards, that's actually going to make it easier going forward. It's really important to actually push on open doors. Build some momentum with people who are actually positive and want to work with you and alongside you. While at the same time continue trying to unlock those closed doors and get other people to join you on the journey. And also, it's everybody's business. So you need to understand who can help you to make positive changes and who benefits. And that's it for me. Thank you all very much.
As before, that's a whole lot of work summarized in very few short minutes, but we're all grateful to the leadership that has been provided by the Greater Manchester Health and Social Care Partnership. And now we hear from Dr. Michelle Bond, who's going to talk to us about how to get things started in an area where there isn't funding available yet.
Hello, my name is Michelle Bond, and I'm a consultant community paediatrician based down in Brighton. I work in a child development centre where we see children who have a range of neurodisabilities and neurodevelopmental problems. So I'm just going to talk about pathways and about our experience in Brighton and what we did. We took a very pragmatic approach. So around sort of 2016, even prior to that, we recognised that we were seeing children with neurodevelopmental problems within our child development centre who had been exposed to alcohol antenatally. But we had no clear pathway or process for assessing these children. And at the time, there wasn't assigned guidance, there wasn't any national guidance, so it was difficult. We did find some training from the University of Washington, and so with 3 of our paediatricians and a psychologist underwent their online training program, and following that, we set up a pathway. We didn't have any additional funding, so we had to just use the available resources that we had, and we took a very pragmatic approach. We did purchase some tools that helped us with the assessing facial features. We were very lucky to have input from an experienced neonatologist, Neil Layton, with an interest in FASD to help us setting up the pathway. And we're very lucky in our child development centre that we have a psychologist, so not all child development centres have access to psychology. And as we've heard earlier from Patricia, it's really helpful to have a psychologist involved for the CNS assessments. So with our pathway, we realised that we needed to do some training on awareness, and we still need to do a bit more on that actually. But we're certainly raising awareness about FASD within with the sort of local health practitioners, at least within our area. So we don't have resources to see children in a sort of one-stop way. We have to rely on assessments they might have done already. So what we do is we collect all of the information that's known to the child about the child before we see them. We see them for a clinical assessment. We decide which other assessments need to be done after that. We use the sign diagnostic algorithm, and we have a peer review process to make sure that we're learning from each other's experience, and then we feed back to parents and carers and provide information to school. There are, I mean, on the slide you can see there are some areas that we're hoping to develop, so it's an ongoing process. We're constantly refining our pathway. We had a service evaluation not long after setting up the service to see whether we'd improve things. So we looked at 15 children who'd been seen, 14 children who'd been seen after setting up the pathway, compare that with 15 that had been seen before the pathway, and we found that we had just improved formulation, clearer outcomes, there was less time to reach a conclusion, and that we are now consistently providing written information for parents and for schools. We did a parent-carer satisfaction survey, which was mainly positive, but also gave us some ideas for where we could improve things. And just lastly, just about the sort of challenges and limitations, as I said before, we don't have any additional funding for this. This has had to be within the parameters of our existing service. We have to rely on assessments that have already been carried out. Sometimes it is difficult to get the assessments we would like to carry out. We do have very limited post-diagnosis support. We're hoping to improve that, and the nice quality standard should help, we hope, to highlight the mentioning that gap locally.
Thank you very much for that. Now we're going to hear from Ali Brown, who joins us from the FASD Hub in Scotland. And as we know, our colleagues in Scotland are a couple of years ahead of us down here, and what Ali's going to talk about is a lived experience, how sometimes even when things look great on paper, maybe that's not always how families experience it. As all these changes move forward, we have to make sure that, we have to make sure that the families that are currently needing support are somehow getting it. Please introduce yourself towards the microphone.
Thank you for having me. My name is Ali Brown. I'm the project manager, as Sandy said, for FASD Hub Scotland. I'm also the FASD lead for Adoption UK, as the organisation develops its support for families affected by fetal alcohol across the all 4 nations. My husband and I are parents to 3 amazing young people, all of whom have prenatal alcohol exposure in their history, and our youngest has an FASD diagnosis, and he's been my greatest teacher on FASD. It's through them that I can stand here today and call myself an expert by lived experience. I'm an adopter, and I consider it my privilege to parent these 3 inspiring, fun and creative young people. FASD Hub provides a support service for all parents and carers of children, young people and young adults who have a history of prenatal alcohol exposure, whether that's with or without a formal diagnosis. This service provides a tiered approach and a reference point for professionals in training and other services to support families that they're working with. FASD Hub Scotland is funded by the Scottish Government and run by Adoption UK in Scotland. I'd like to talk to you now about one family's experience. It's a journey that could be typical of any family that's experienced by the Hub. They didn't know about FASD or fetal alcohol. They were experiencing some challenges at home and parenting and supporting their child. Traditional parenting wasn't working, and the suggestions from friends and family wasn't working for them either. Sorry. I'm really nervous, as you can tell. When I spoke to this family earlier this week, these are the words that they told me from the support that they'd received from our parent partner. they told me that things were crumbling for them around their ears, but the support that they'd received from the parent partner had helped them experience. Everything felt like it was crumbling for them around their ears, but through their parenting partner, their lived experience, it had helped them understand that they weren't alone. The wider community, those of us that have got lived experience of FASD, we're parents and carers, and we've got signed guidelines and nice quality standards. All of these things have been developed and created with lived experience. People have been involved in these things, but to make sure that they're put into practice, that we see them come out of the other side, we have to have the experts in the room. We have to have people with lived experience. We are the people that can bring to the room, to the professionals, our understanding. We are the people that can be the translators in the room. We are the people that can peel back the diagnosis, that can peel back what does it really mean to live with, to be the individuals that are parenting, to help you understand what does that really mean. So I'm sorry I've made a complete mess of my notes. I've totally mixed them up. I'm neurodiverse myself, so my neurodiversity has got the better of me. But I would just really say to you, and I'm sure that people that will come behind me will do a much better job of that, but please, those of you that are out there, please hear that us that are parenting young people with FASD, who are individuals with FASD, you need to listen to our voices. Thank you.
There's not a family that's affected by FASD here in this room or listening to this who doesn't relate to what was just said and the emotion and the intensity of that. And so, Ali, I think you did exactly what we asked you to do here today. And it's one of the hardest things I can say for me personally as well, that when you, and I see people nodding in the back of the room, Richard's nodding, others are nodding, you know, when you work on something as your day job, that also affects your home life so intensely, it's really challenging to bridge that. And, you know, all power to everybody out there. And in fact, that's a perfect segue, because now we're going to go into some further details of why all of this is going to make a difference. Where we have some, we're planning little pop-up sessions with people with lived experience. And the first two who are going to come up are Jan and Rossi, who maybe some people saw recently in The Sun, featured in The Sun, in The Mirror, or in Channel 5. They were part of some of the news coverage that was happening recently about FASD. Jan and Rossi, please come up. And remember to talk into the microphone.
I just wanted to say that was amazing, and you really described it phenomenally. Don't feel like pressure from anyone in this room. You are phenomenal as a human being for doing this and sharing your experience. So, thank you.
Hiya, I'm Jan, and I kind of class myself as no longer the elephant in the room, which is the birth mum. And if you look at the picture that's on the back in there, I'm equally nervous, Alex, and there again, glad you're in your club. You've got a picture on the left, and Rossi, my son here, my birth son, have agreed to let me show this picture, because this is the picture of Murray, of Rossi, of Georgia, of any other neurodiverse person with FASD. They mask and they black their way through life as best they can. But what I get and what any other parent gets, the adopter, the foster carer, the birth mother, they get this. And this is what we and the guidelines are trying to change and are changing. And I, for one, am so happy that it is changing. It's there, numbers 1 and 2, I believe, are all about talking to the woman that's pregnant. Equally, I really believe that the father should be there too, because they're a team. And the father has to help the woman not to drink and certainly not encourage her. But the difference now, back when I was pregnant with Rossi, I won't bore you with all of the details, but I was never actually asked. And I'm sure you've probably heard this before, you've probably seen it on the news now. I wasn't actually asked about my alcohol. I was asked about a cat. Did I have a cat? Toxoplasmosis. And I was horrified. I nearly split up with my partner. It was like, get rid of the cat. And cheese. And the cheese. Yeah, absolutely. Cheese and the eggs. Lots of conversations about that. Nothing about the alcohol. In fact, it was the opposite. I was so stressed that I was having another child after 10, 11 years. I was now, I was kind of free, love it, glad. Best thing that ever happened this year. But I wasn't actually asked about the drinking side of things. I was offered to have a sleeping tablet or to have a tot of brandy. I could not take a sleeping tablet because that was horrendous. How dare somebody offer me medication? I was already on medication for my heart. So I chose brandy, and I had a tot of brandy of an evening to try and de-stress, because being stressed was bad for the baby. Brandy wasn't stressful. So it shows you how far things have come. And basically, what I'm trying to say now, which I think has got across, is that this has been this 10-year journey for me. It's like a huge circle that started with somebody totally missing in this room right now, who's the birth mother of all birth mother warriors, and that's Pip Williams, who we've lost. And I couldn't not stand here today without mentioning her, because without her, I wouldn't be standing here. She said, Jen, you've got a voice and you've got to use it. So it's basically, hey, you've got any no, you've got any. Please ask the birth parents, ask the people about alcohol. It's nothing bad. I would have so much appreciated it. If I'd have had the facts, I wouldn't have probably damaged my son. I'm going to over to you, Rossi.
That's me. I found out I had FASD around 12, 13. And I was already diagnosed with autism. So just another diagnosis, I didn't think anything of it. So I just lived my life like there was no tomorrow and got on with it, and didn't think it would affect me. But further on into my college years, my social life, my jobs, it's difficult, and you have to learn that FASD does have a serious effect on young adults' lives and how they experience that life. And this is what our road trip, what our Mum and Son is all about. It's about bringing awareness to it. And one thing that I would say for any young kid out there watching with FASD, you can do whatever you want if you set your mind to it and you find your creativity. I mean, I'm a makeup artist, and I wouldn't be anywhere without my mother. So if you take their support and really work hard, even if you don't work hard and you just use your inspiration as the main guideline in your life, I truly believe that you can be exceptional and amazing at whatever you set your mind to. So thank you very much.
Now I'm getting all emotional because I don't know if you've heard, Rossi, but when you were on Channel 5 the other night I showed it to my son, who's also on the Adults and Young Adults Committee, but he's the youngest person on that committee. And when he saw you talking, he listened, he heard Jan talking about what it's like from a birth mom's perspective to learn that your child has FASD. And he also saw you talking about what it was like to have FASD. And then he talked about how creative you are and all the good things about you. And I wish you could have seen his smile and how he stood up and he just lit up and he said, that needs to go viral. He was so excited, and the work that all of our adults and young adults with FASD, not just those on the committee, but all of them out there across the country who bring their voices to this debate is so important because you're inspiring other people out there to do more and to do better. And it's just, it's amazing. And I can't wait to see what happens with this road. Oh, sorry, 2022, coming soon. Next, we're going to hear from Susan McGraw, who's going to give us another perspective on lived experience. This is from someone who doesn't know, okay? Coming from somebody who had diagnosis quite early.
Yes.
But.
And a big but. So yeah, I'm quite passionate about this because my son, like Sandy said, was diagnosed at 6 months old, but as only just recently, at age 15, had his assessments that he needed. So we've had years and years of trying to get professionals to understand why he needs those assessments. So we've got passed around from lots of different professionals, none of which understand FASD. Nobody's taking responsibility. And until recently, last year, when somebody involved attended some FASD training. So that was a big change in our support as a whole, actually, not just the assessments. So, but there have been many others like us who children will have been diagnosed very young, as babies, as young children, will be in the same situation and won't have the assessments that they need. So, and it's really important that the team around the child, including the family, fully understand where they need to be supported more, where their strengths are actually is really important as well. And for them to, because often they present, as it's been said before, they present as more able and they mask a lot. So no assessment results in them receiving insufficient support. Could be safeguarding risks, impacts on mental health, and just their all-round outcomes are going to be a lot less than what they could have achieved if they had the right assessments. But then there's also a group of people who will have had their assessments, but they will be outdated as well, and they'll be in the same situation. The gap gets wider as they get older, so those assessments need to be done again. Because it's important to understand where they've made progress, where they haven't made progress. So we need to tailor the areas where we need to support them more as they change. So I don't want to think what it would have been like actually heading towards adulthood without the assessments, because we were getting very close. We had his speech and language assessment actually said that I just received the other day that he needs some specialist programs which he hasn't had access to at all the way through his education. So we had no understanding of why they were needed, as well, why the things we were trying to get were needed. So things like reasonable adjustments that were needed in school, especially around the curriculum, those were really hard to get across without the assessments to back you up. So actually the correct assessments at the correct time would actually be a better use of funds. You'd actually save a lot more money by using that money at the beginning to do the assessments that they needed. It would give them the support when they needed, be able to build on their strengths, enabling them to thrive and reach their full potential.
Thank you, Susan. You said in there that you don't want to think about what it might have been like to enter adulthood without those assessments done and the right supports in place. And I have to give a little bit of a warning right now because the next presentation is potentially upsetting for some, so if this might be too upsetting, just don't listen for 5 minutes. But this is about someone who didn't have those supports. So Joe Buckard is going to speak for those people who can't be here, and sadly because they're no longer here.
Hi everybody, I'm Joanna Buckard. It's really nice to see you actually in the room, it's really exciting. For some people I've known for nearly 2 decades, others I've known more recently and only via screen, so it's hugely exciting. So today I'm going to be obviously giving a sensitive content warning before I start, and I'm going to be talking about a young man called Aaron. So who was Aaron? Aaron was a young man who was very much loved by his foster carer, and by everybody who knew him, he was so vibrant, so charismatic. How did he come to be diagnosed with FASD? So he was a child who was in foster care, and his foster carer was a carer through an independent foster care agency, and she happened to come to some training that I was delivering, and while she sat there, of those of you that deliver FASD training, you'll have experienced this, in the middle of the session, she started to cry, and she said, "It is literally like you're describing the boy I'm caring for." And she said, "What do I do?" And I said, "How old is he?" And she said, "He's 17. And I said, please try and get him diagnosed before he was 18. And so she did. It was a battle for him, but she worked really hard to get him diagnosed. And he was diagnosed at 18 by a paediatrician. But that diagnosis did not include any of the psychological assessments that we've heard talked about. So similar to Susan just described. And so he was moved into independence. At the time, the carer worked really hard to try and explain to the leaving care team why he was going to need a lot more support than it might seem. The leaving care team had never had any training on FASD, nor had his adult social worker. So he moved into a semi-supported living environment, and it just didn't meet his needs. The staff there had never had FASD training. There was a lot of people there who had chaotic lives, and he found it really difficult to cope. He started to have difficulties where he was drinking more, which hadn't been a factor when he lived with his carer. There were issues with staying up all night because it was quiet then. He wasn't able to get support because the support was available between 10 and 4, and not all people's problems occurred between 10 and 4. And so it was a really challenging time. He became very dysregulated, he wasn't attending appointments, and through his dysregulation he ended up trashing the room and was evicted. He went to live with somebody who he believed was his boyfriend, and that was a really difficult time. So I want to say that in relation to the diagnosis, despite the fact he was 18, the diagnosis then was ARND, which we know now moving forward will be FASD without sentinel facial features. So I think it's really important that we also consider that diagnosis did not include the care management plan. So, we've seen as under the new nice quality standard, this addition, which is so welcomed by many of us, this addition of the care management plan. Now, should there have been a care management plan and someone overseeing the whole of his case rather than just bits and pieces? Because once he was diagnosed, it was closed. The service from health was closed to him, and social care had never had training. So there's just this massive void. And that's something that moving forward we really hope that other people won't fall through those gaps. So just very briefly to explain some of the difficulties he had, I've mentioned housing, and he had difficulty with employment, and so he was in receipt of benefits, including PIP. But unfortunately, due to exploitation, most of that money went on other people, or things that, like tattoos and things that he acted impulsively and spent that money on. He had difficulty in understanding money in context, so despite having he came across really well, in appointments or at the benefits agency, but actually understanding and being able in the moment to use that was problematic. Now, as a young man who was so sociable, so charismatic, he had difficulties with those social relationships because he couldn't see when people were manipulating him. And unfortunately, he experienced every kind of exploitation, financial, sexual, and modern slavery. There were difficulties in him accessing health, so he would stop going to GP appointments unless somebody could go with him. And of course, previously, the foster carer was very well able to do that for him, and delighted to. But once he made that move, who was going to be that person to go with him to these appointments? So if a social worker, if a leaving care worker went with him, then that was fine. If they didn't, he just didn't go. And the same happened with mental health. So the mental health services ended up being closed to him because of failure to engage. And we need to really reflect on this. Is it failure to engage, or is it that we are not making appropriate adjustments for people with FASD? He started to have issues with risk-taking. And so this was often through being suggestible. And so people who were his friends would suggest things to him like, why don't you jump off this roof and you try it? Now fortunately in that circumstance he was okay. But there were other instances of drinking, lying in the road. People would call ambulances, he wouldn't go to the hospital. And just to remind you, this was a very much loved young man, and he is desperately missed by his foster carers, his birth sister and family. So what could have made a difference? So I believe that if there had been trained professionals from the beginning to recognise the FASD symptoms, he could have had early diagnosis. In the end, what actually happened was that it was a foster carer attending a training course. The social workers involved hadn't had training, and it was coming from a foster carer. So if there had been earlier recognition, that could have made a huge difference to his outcome. If there had been FASD pathways, and actually in the area where he comes from, there aren't clear FASD pathways. So even though he'd been diagnosed, I was working with a social worker trying to get him to have these psychological assessments arranged, but it just wasn't possible in that area. Because Aaron's IQ was over 70, he couldn't be seen by the learning disability team, he didn't fit under the mental health team, and there just wasn't the provision. And that is something that following this, there is some hope that it's going to change within that local area. If there'd been early diagnosis, as I said, that would have made a difference, but also it really absolutely needed to have those psychological and speech and language assessments, because they would have really explained the difference between how Aaron presented, so well, and the areas of difficulty he had and areas he needed a little bit more help and support. A care management plan, somebody overseeing all of this would have made a difference for him to have appropriate housing, for him to have support in employment. All of these things would have been a much positive outcome for him. An education healthcare plan would have helped with, obviously through school, but at school, how did they see him? They saw him as quiet, somebody who kept his head down. So sometimes people will think that someone's got FASD, if they become dysregulated, they may present in a certain way at school. That was not the case for him. He presented very well, he just kept his head down. Of course, those difficulties were sometimes then expressed at home. If he'd understood his own diagnosis, that would have made a difference. And despite the fact he was very pleased, actually, to be diagnosed at 18, because he always knew there was something different, he always knew that there was something going on, he didn't really understand what that meant in real terms, in terms of the help and support he needed. As an adult, he would have benefited from a mental capacity assessment that considered the frontal lobe paradox, and that's something that didn't take place. And that also could have helped make a difference for making appropriate plans for his future. And obviously, suitable post-18 support. Now, his foster carer very much wants people to hear Aaron's story because she wants it to make a difference. And she believes that Aaron would too. So, thank you.
It's just so sad to think what the world's missed out on when a young person dies too soon. And going back to the fact that every single person with FASD has a great deal to give. They've got a great, I know my son tries harder than anybody I know. He's got strengths and talents that the world needs in it. So it is sad. And thank you, Joe. I know that's not easy to give that kind of a talk, especially the short time that we've given for it. Brian is going to come up next, and he's going to talk about the importance of involving people with lived experience in the formulation of ways forward, because as we're giving these kind of short vignettes right now, but this report is 130 and more pages, full of practical ideas on how to implement some of these things, and we do encourage people to come and have a look.
I'm going to say just wow. I mean, aside from all that, I'm also a parent of 3 children with FASD. In fact, 2 are adults now. Georgie was going to be with us, but as a typical person with neurodiversity, at 2:30 last night she was still awake worrying. She picked out her kid, and she's watching now. I know that. I'm just going to say wow, because 10 years ago when we were doing this, we would never have had this kind of conversation. It would have been, yeah, FASD is real, that it's real, we know it is now. I'm going to start off with one of George's bits about work from when she was at secondary school, and it sums up actually where our kids are lots of times. And I'm talking to not the people here, not the people out in YouTube land, I'm talking to the tens of thousands of people in teams around children who really need to understand what's going on, because that's really important. As we've heard our kids mask, as we've heard, we know this is a condition where our kids are so different at home to where they are with medics, with social workers and at school. We need to actually listen to the voices of those that have got the lived experience. It's really important. So the question becomes, what's it like to live in the moment, every single moment of each and every day? It becomes a huge challenge for parents of every kind. Not just foster carers, not just adopters, not just birth parents, every kind of parent you can imagine. And more importantly, even to what is it like to have FASD? And unless we listen to the families, we will never understand the neurodiversity and the diversity of the challenges that we face, because it's not a one-size-fits-all condition, so we have to listen to everyone. At a basic level, if I talk as a parent, I'm sick of being told I've really got nothing to offer teams of professionals. Only this year I've been told, because I don't have a medical qualification, I've got nothing to offer in terms of making people understand what it's like to live with FASD. Last year I got my work that I've done in the field was described as research by another team of professionals. And you've got to develop that very thick skin to keep going, because it's really hard. It gets worse sometimes, because actually we have to parent in a different way. We have to parent in a way that meets the needs of our children. And at the extreme end, parents can get into problems with potential harm that they might cause, because people who are assessing them in a neurodevelopmental way don't take into account their disability because they don't know it. It's really, really important for us as parents to get people to listen to us, but more so it's more important for professionals to understand what we're going through. So we can get diagnosis. So we can get support for the children that live with us. And so we can parent. So we don't have to be the experts, because that's important. I'm also going to put a proper call out for foster carers, because that's where I started to learn about FASD, and living with the girls changed everything that I understood. Things from the Department of Health and Social Care needs analysis will talk about 27% of children in care who will be affected by FASD. That came out in September. If we look at those figures for England now, that is 21,800 children with FASD in this country now. That's twice as many people as live in the town where I live. And I'll call out there for foster carers who don't have parental responsibility. We've heard we have to be that voice, but sometimes it's really hard for us to get that voice across. But as George would say, and here's George, as she would say, we don't know what it's like to have FASD, and I know she's watching now, if she'd been here, she'd tell me I don't know what it's like to have FASD, because we don't. And it's obviously vital to have that voice. We've heard from Irene, we've heard from Rossi, but there's actually many, many more that are getting that voice, and it's really important to have that voice and to see where it stands. It's not easy to get that voice. Before I was in the FASD field, I did children and young people's voice and leadership, and it doesn't come. You've got to build up that voice. But we've got a strong voice now. We've got an increasing voice. We've got a voice on Instagram. We've got a voice on Facebook. We've got a voice on Snapchat where young people with FASD are putting their views across, and we need to listen to that. We started with George 12 years ago, talking to trainee GPs from Addenbrooke's when she was 8. That was because my GP isn't a doctor and her son's got FASD. And that's what made the difference to us. And a head teacher in a primary school who's an adopter, whose daughter has FASD. That made the whole total difference to us because we had a team around us that knew what was going on. It's really important to hear our voice, and I think through what we've managed to do with the work that we've done in Me and My FASD, through a partnership between Seashell and the National FASD, which has produced masses of branded FASD resources going out. We have an experts committee, we've got an adults and young people's committee, which was also guiding us. So every single piece of that has been driven by children and young people with FASD, adults with FASD. They make suggestions to us in Zoom calls, because this was all done in COVID, where we go, can we do that? Yeah, we've done it, and you'll see some of our resources out there. But everything there has been driven by children, young people and adults with FASD. In conclusion, what I want to say, it's right to celebrate what we've got. 6 months ago, we were nowhere near this. This is brilliant. But we've got to go further, it's really important. My son is 14. He hasn't got 4 years to wait until the services line themselves up, because he'll be an adult. And of course, everything we're talking about now is for children. Maureen, Rusty, Georgia, Jodie are adults. They need that thing, they need that now. So the battle is still on. So the time is now. The time is still to go forward. Please listen to us, and especially those with FASD, because it's vital that that voice is heard.
Thanks very much. And Brian's also a special guardian. We should give a shout out as well to all the special guardians out there, because in many ways they have an even harder time trying to get listened to on this topic. I'm aware that in this last session we've talked about some difficult things, and I just wanted to remind everybody here and those viewing that there is support available across the country. There's an informal coalition of groups called the FASD UK Alliance. If you look that up, if you Google that, you'll find local, regional, and national support around the country. And there's a real community of people who are trying to help support others. So you're not alone. And also to the commissioners and policymakers and others who might be watching this, to know that if you're looking for a place to start making change, you can reach out to some of those groups, and if there's not one in particular in your area, contact the one nearest by, because I know certainly in Hertfordshire, where my whole journey with this got started, we have a lot of people come from other nearby areas. So there is support, it's growing, there are some online communities and things, and you can get tapped into that, and it's really a good place to start. Now we're going to shift a little bit, and as I started off by saying, there's an unprecedented amount of policy work that's been happening across the country in recent years, and I think all of us need to celebrate that work, to be appreciative of that work, because it didn't happen by accident. And if you think that this also coincides with one of the biggest public health challenges of a century, hats off to everybody involved who has made these changes possible. If you think back to that tipping point chart that I had. But we're here now, we're talking about moving forward a little bit too, and today we're really lucky to be joined by Ian Armstrong, who's the Alcohol Program Manager from the Office for Health Improvements and Disparities, which I'm still getting used to saying, because in a way it's the new Public Health England. Ian, thank you very much. Over to you now.
Thanks, Danny. Thank you everyone for having me here. Who is this guy? I was thinking. I am from the alcohol team in the Office for Health Improvement and Disparity, as Danny said, formerly Public Health England and now part of the Department of Health and Social Care. And the bit of overhead that I work in, what we do is we collate, we analyse evidence, and we use it to inform policy and to implement change. So for the last 15 years, I've been trying to implement probably a bit more. I want to start with a bit of congratulations. There's been a lot of congratulation today, and quite rightly so. Last Wednesday, when the quality standard came out, Sandy and I had an exchange, and she said she could hardly believe that the quality standard was actually here. And I said, I know, I so know how it feels. I've done so many things we've spent, put heart and soul into it. We spent years, sometimes, very often months, building up to a point where you actually achieve something. I work in public health, so that doesn't happen all that often, but you get to a point where you've actually achieved something. And I said, sometimes the celebrations are muted and you don't actually take the time to celebrate. Because you get to the top of the mountain, and what do you see? More mountains. Because always there's the next thing. But what I would encourage you all to do is to celebrate. Take a look back down the mountain, take a look at where you were, and see how far you've come. Because it is a long way. This report and the quality standard are a long way from where we all were. So, everyone in this community, the third sector, the clinical experts with lived experience, some national government bodies like the HSC and PHE now and OHID. We all deserve some credit, and NICE in particular deserves some credit, and we deserve to reflect back on what's actually a great achievement. And I sat as an observer on the round tables that produced this report, and the expertise around those tables and the speed with which this huge report was published are impressive. So, take time, recognise how far you've come, and then look ahead to the next challenge. So, this community, and I think I regard OHID as part of this community, although I feel a bit like an interloper here, has got a lot to do. So, we've got quality standard, we've got this report, but we've got an awful lot to do. So let's look at the next challenge. Now, what I'm going to talk to you about just now is to just share some of our experience of implementing change, because what we need people to do is do things differently. Change requires people to operate differently. And we've got some experience of implementing that. So you need to change practice. So a plan for changing practice. And these are some of the key things that I think we will need to do, that are needed, and that from my experience we actually do in order to get change. Stakeholder mapping. Make sure all of the relevant people are involved. And there's going to be a large range of relevant people who need to be brought into the fold, consulted, worked with, cajoled, persuaded. Empower the workforce. I've worked on things like introduction of identification brief, advice screening brief interventions for alcohol for about 15 years. You can have regulation for that to happen, you can have requirement for that to happen, but health professionals, unless they feel empowered and unless there's training for them, they tend not to do these things. So there's got to be, and to be honest, if there's no training for them, they're an excuse not to do these things. So you need the skills, knowledge and understanding. Mechanisms to change experience, to change procedures within services. Carrots and sticks. We've got the nice quality standard gives us quite a lot of carrot, gives us a tiny bit of stick. But we need to explore those mechanisms to change procedures. And we need to collect data. Not just data about people experiencing FASD, but actually we need to collect data about what people are actually doing to see if they're doing it more, or to see if they're doing it differently, which is challenging. So, to break that down a little bit, working with the right people, so starting for 10. NHS England and NHS Improving Health Education England, Royal Colleges and professional bodies need to be involved. We need to see what they're already doing, because they're already doing things. See if they can support any changes in practice, if there are any emerging or existing frameworks that we can get into that will change the way that people are trained and developed. This is really important. Clearly describe what the skills and knowledge are. There's talk throughout this report, there's talk throughout the quality standard about the need for training, about the need for appropriate skills. It's really, really important to describe clearly and ambiguously, preferably with a broad professional consensus, what the actual skills and knowledge are that you actually require people to have. Because what that gives you is a way to specify the training that you're going to do, and it also gives you a way to quality assure training that people are offering, because training will be offered by all sorts of people. If you've got something like, let's call it the competency framework, everything can be referenced to that framework, so you've got some way of measuring and assuring what's actually delivered. Develop learning resources and make them freely available. Develop patient resources and make them freely available. We've done that with identification, brief advice. They're all in one place, and it's all very well having training, but you've actually got to have people do the training. So it's got to be somewhere where people can access it, and it's got to be something that they can get credit for doing. We're talking a lot about health professionals, so we need the training and learning and materials to be where these professionals can actually access them, and so that it's something that they can prioritise within competing demands within their training schedule. Set a way to develop clinicians' competence. There are things called communities of practice just now that have blossomed within the sort of virtual communications world, so that people, rather than being isolated in their own areas, can actually share practice, so the whole community can develop together, so that the practitioners can develop together and share systems information together. And finally, seek out mechanisms, really important, and that's somewhere where we can help, is to find mechanisms that actually incentivise change. Really, really valuable. It's a matter of horizon scanning, it's a matter of dogged determination, but finding things that actually incentivise people to do things, both planning-wise and practice-wise. And finally, data. Identify or develop data indicators to monitor that this change is actually taking place, whether or not this change is taking place. So you can tell that people are doing things differently. I was talking earlier and to a colleague, and I said, yeah, it sounds easy when you say it quickly. Identifying data is a tough one, but it's really important because you don't count it, how do you know that it's changed? So, once again, onwards and upwards, and congratulations, and give yourselves all a round of applause.
Thanks very much. There's a lot in there. And just a reminder again for those watching that the NICE quality standard is full of those sorts of indicators. It's measurable, and people in different areas will be asked to report on how changes are happening in their area. Bill Esterson, unfortunately, due to his parliamentary duties, isn't able to be here today, but he did send his greetings and good wishes to the community. As we all are aware, he is one of the people who's been trying to drive change from within Parliament. Next, we're going to hear just some final thoughts from Iman Takhan, who is a member of the National FASD Experts Committee, and we just thought that Roger's not here yet, we would have a clinician who's been helping to guide us to help give some final thoughts.
Hello everyone, thank you for asking me, Sandy, to give these final thoughts. I just want to say that the quality standards, when it was commissioned or released last week, It was a very emotional time for me because I remember the long journey I and several clinicians and families have been through in trying to push the door, push the barriers to get services established. And it takes me back to, I think it was 2009 when I attended the first conference for FASD in Maastricht, and attending and saying that it was just myself and Randa, and we were the only two people from the UK at that meeting. And that was where my journey into FASD started, because I looked and I thought, surely we have lots of affected people in the UK, what is happening, are we in denial? And I personally did meet lots of barriers, and Sandy and Martin can testify to that. So thanks, Roshin, for that valuable slide where you said we should jump, be brave, you might fall. I've heard lots of great tips today, and I just want to thank everyone because it's been amazing working this journey. I've learned a lot myself, and several clinicians, we've learned a lot. And I just wanted to thank the families and the children, young people, and everyone who's been fighting for all these years. It's been very difficult, but we can celebrate, just like Ian has said. Ian has said we should take some time to celebrate this time because we've come a long way and there's still a lot to do. And we've heard from the people with lived experiences. They've told us to listen to them. And I think that's so important because we can't take this step without listening to the people who have been affected. And I just want to congratulate the FASD community because when you look back, and I've been working for as a consultant for about 18 years. That's how long I've been working. But I've looked at all the different fields that I've worked in, and I've never ever had such traction in this field I've worked in with other disorders, where families have played such a big part in helping to drive the services, and also being able to have a good practice guide to help us to how to do it. Whenever we have nice releasing documents, go and sort it out in your different areas. But we're so lucky that we've been able to work in a roundtable to produce reports, to say to us, that's the instruction manual, take it to your different areas and work with it. So the charge is back to us now. We all own this document. It's all our responsibility. We all have to go out and we all have to go back to our different areas, speak to the staff. We've got staff working with us. Many people haven't heard about FASD. We need to have those meetings, we need to have those discussions, we need to talk to our leaders, our managers, wherever we are, health, education, social work, and community. We've seen the impact of not treating, not recognizing this. So the charge is back to us, and I hope as we walk out of this room today, and we carry this report that has been worked by so many people, that we will go out there empowered to go and make the change to help the community that we are here to serve. And thank you, everyone. Thank you much. And I sat back there and I look at you and I'm just glowing and just happy that this is what happens when you support a young person. So thank you for standing up and thank you for speaking out for the young people. And thank you, everyone that has helped to bring this day possible. And thanks to Sandy for her great work.
And I like to talk about the power of one, and to all of those practitioners and clinicians and social workers and teachers and people in the criminal justice system and foster carers and special guardians and doctors and birth families and the whole community. I'm sure I've left some people out, but it just takes one person, and especially one professional who listens and understands and gives you that extra bit of time, even if you don't have the answers, just to give that little bit of extra time. And for us, for my family, Ian was that person. And she helped guide our family through some really, really hard days. So now as my son's nearing 18 and is getting ready to leave the pediatric service, I really don't want to let go, because we know it's a scary world out there in the adult world, but just the power of one is intense. I also wanted to just read out to you, I haven't been ignoring you all, I've been messaging with Raja from the front of the room, and he just wanted to add a couple final thoughts. He says that the fact is that this is the start, not the end. This document will be a resource for people to use to support change. There's still lots to learn, and talking to each other is important to drive that change. Always remember people at the center of this, and never lose sight that we want to make people's lives better. He says thanks, and he sends his apologies again for not being here, but he's enjoyed listening. And I want to thank everybody too. I mean, I really know that it's unforgivable to send busy professionals documents at 10 o'clock at night and expect to turn around by the next morning, but boy, we had it. The group of 60 people who have been involved in this, here's the final report. It's available on the website, and we could never have done it without the goodwill of all those people involved, and so thank you to everybody there. We're going to end now. For everybody in the room, you might notice that there are a lot of these on the table, and I don't want to bring these back to the office. So everybody, please take 5 or 6 of them if you'd like. Bring them, send them on to people who can use them. You are the best distributors possible we have of this report. If you want to send an email later to let us know who you sent it to, that would be great, so we can see what kind of ripple effects there are to the report. And for people watching, if you want some copies, just email us at info@nationalfasd.org.uk, and we can send some on to you. As I said, the version that's online is fully interactive. Okay, but just to end us all now, we are going to, oh there, I forgot that was on there, I think I already said that. I came from a peace and security background. Gandhi is one of my heroes. We must be the change that we wish to see in the world, although I think that wasn't actually Gandhi who said that. People are going to correct me, Martin. Yeah, anyway, I still like Senator. But we're going to end with, we asked at the beginning of our project that we did with Seashell, we asked young people to tell us what they wanted us to know about living with FASD. And this was their answers. These are all, every word in here comes from a young person with FASD. It's performed by people with FASD. And I just think it's a lovely way to end this day.
See my friendly smile. Please don't see the worst in me, just save it for a while. I feel safe and free.
And if you balance, then you're lost. I'm still honest. I'm nothing that comes. I can be so funny. I tell you it's all true. I was very gentle, but so was correct too.
Many times I'm in confusion, many times I'm holding pain, many times I'm finding what you said won't work inside my brain. I don't know expectations, so I often play the fool. Other times I stay quiet, not interact at all.
I see the world with different colors, and I see a different way to be others. The alcohol got in my brain, but I still laugh and smile the same. Because of my penis, I'm Groundhog Day, Groundhog Day, Groundhog Day. Every life is precious, that's easy to see. I want to show you all my skills to show the It's not my fault that it affects my brain with my anger. The growing role windows in my tummy when I'm sad. My busy brain will switch off and that makes me feel one.
I'm sure my brain isn't mine, someone else is doing it. In bed it's a volcano, after meltdowns can't remember it. I'm not invisible, not different as it seems. It's a difficult condition, but I still have visions and dreams.
I have FASD.
I have FASD, walk along with me.
I have FASD.
I have FASD, walk along with me.
I have FASD, walk along with me. I have FASD, walk along with me. I have FASD, walk along with me.
I've got FASD, walk with me.
So thank you, everybody. That's the end of our live stream, but it's not the end of this discussion. We'll continue it online and on Twitter, and another person. I'm seeing a lot of teary eyes in the room right now, and I feel that way too. It's been a long journey, but we're on a good path now. Anyway, thank you all very much. Enjoy.